championships for factory race teams alongside the likes of Max Verstappen, as well as being part of the U.S. national team at just 13 years old. Amazing. He relocated to the UK after finishing with school in order to pursue his childhood ambition of pursuing a race driving career. He has seen success from the very start, finishing on the podium at the Walter Hayes Trophy on his racing debut, despite having never driven a Formula Ford race car before. In 2023 alone, Horatio has won over 20 races against many seasoned veterans. There's probably a lot of great stories there as well. With the ultimate goal of winning Le Mans, he has established a reputation in historic motorsports and hopes to use this as a springboard towards his future career. So please welcome Horatio Fitzsimon.
Thank you, everyone. Start off by thanking everyone for being here. I know a lot of you are regulars. I've only been here once, thanks to Gary Horscourter, who brought me a few years ago before I moved over to the UK to pursue racing. So I want to start off by thanking all my friends and family who've travelled from near and far away to come here today. And so I want to start off. You may have seen as you came in that bright red Lotus racing car, and the significance of that, I'm going to play a quick clip. Please turn your phone off. It's what happens when you bring your father to these events. Who else? So the car outside is a very significant part of my, I see it as my upbringing still. It's only been a few years of racing, but I've been to more countries and more circuits sitting in that racing car than any other. And strangely enough, there's a really funny thing as I've been through the racing journey so far. I've learned that the world's a very small place, and you think that when you go somewhere 5,000 miles away, you won't see anyone you already know. And I've learned you actually have to be very careful what you say to people. So many of you may know Pat Moran, who sat over there at that table. So Pat, in fact, owned that racing car. I think we were chatting outside earlier. About 12 years ago, he sold it. And I had no idea, and I was digging through the history file of it when I first came to drive the car about 3 years ago. And I saw some receipts for it, and they said Pleasanton, Danville, and I thought, well, maybe this is some of my father's paperwork mixed up. I'm from Pleasanton, for those that don't know. I'm English, but I grew up in the Bay Area, so I'm still very American. And so to see the car's history, to connect it to Pleasanton is quite a small, quite a strange coincidence. So it's something that I find very, very wholesome. So I want to just quickly play a quick clip of the car, and it's got some period history of it as well.
Tommy Reed, great name in Irish motorsport.
So the car is a really spectacular thing. History-wise, it's a 1962 Formula Junior, which is essentially a Formula 2 car of the early 60s. So the likes of Jim Clark, Denny Holm, Jack Brabham, many of the fantastic drivers of the 60s and 70s started in the cars like this. At a similar age to myself, I'm 25 years old, which is essentially the same age as a lot of the Formula 1 drivers would have been in the 60s and 70s. So a lot of people in this room I know are historic racers, and I've raced with a few of you. Most of you won't recognise me, but that's because the last time you saw me I was probably a little kid asking to sit in your car. So here's a bit of my background. So that man there in the orange cap is my father, who sat just there, table here, come today with my mother. So I'm very grateful to them, not only bringing us to America when I was very young, for them getting me into racing. My father brought me into racing at a very young age, and so he's mostly to blame for my background. My mother obviously gave me permission to race, and so it's something that the family, it's a bit of a struggle for everyone, because suddenly your entire calendar revolves around motorsport. So a lot of vacations were sacrificed so that we could go racing when I was a kid. So to start off, here are some family pictures of me. So I'm the youngest of 5. I was born in a small town in the UK, a place called Towcester, and no, it's not spelled the way it sounds, but it's right next door to Silverstone F1 circuit. So I was born about 5 minutes away from the Grand Prix cars. So you could say it was kind of in the blood. I could hear the racing cars as soon as I was born. So there's me being held. You can see how happy I was in my oldest brother's arms. This is when I'm about 2 years old, sat in front of my father's 1983 Porsche Cup car, which he raced in Classic Carrera Cup when I was a kid. So that car must have had a fantastic influence on me. This is up at Monterey, or that's Sears Point, at one of the CSRG races when I was a little boy. This is here in Richmond. That's my first time sitting in a Formula Junior at Richmond Port. And that's the same category as the car that sat outside. Here's a couple other pictures. There's me pointing at a 312T steering wheel. My father will recognise that one. That one went into the motor racing furnace as soon as I started karting. So that funded my first test. So thank you for that. So here's catching the bug early on. As I say, my father was into motor racing. He loved it as a kid. Unfortunately, he didn't have the same luck with a father who got him into racing when he was very young. My father was brought up as a football fanatic, which he never was. And so when I came along, I was the youngest. My eldest brother, who was extremely talented in a go-kart, but unfortunately he wasn't interested. My second brother came along, and he was very interested. I think me too. He's a little bit hopeless in a car. He still is now, but he's a lovely guy. So yeah, he then wanted a son. He said to my mother when they met that he'd have a son who'd be a racing driver, specifically a Formula 1 driver, so it's been a bit of a letdown up till now. But yeah, when I was about 2 years old, that's when the bug really hit. So my father, you may recognise in this picture, I believe this is Mosport in about 69. This is a Formula 5000 car. So it's essentially a Formula 1 car, but with a Chevy V8. And this is George Eaton's car. My father bought this in about 2004, and my mother made well, I don't actually know if she made the mistake, but she knew about it. But my father decided to restore it in the downstairs of the house. So you can see the top left there. That's the McLaren tub, and he started restoration of it. And yeah, unfortunately for him, at night, when everyone would go to bed, it would be left unattended. So I would sit in it. And yeah, the F5000 was my first real experience as a kid of a racing car. And I don't remember my life before racing. That's all I ever wanted to do. So this car was a massive influence on me. And in fact, the car, strangely enough, the connection with not just the F5000, with another member of the Lunch Bunch, who sadly is not here today, and he's back in the UK, and he's been a massive supporter of mine, a gentleman who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Howden Ganley. So Howden has been a great friend and almost like I like to view myself as his protege. Howden was to Bruce McLaren what I like to think of I am to him. So whenever I'm racing at any circuit over the world, I'll phone Howden just for some advice, or if anything, we have a conversation probably 2 or 3 times a week. And Howden met my father through the F5000, and to me, when I was a kid, he was just another friend of my father's, so I didn't actually know anything about him. And then I got to an age where I realised what Formula 1 was, and then suddenly Howden was my biggest hero. So this car was what introduced us to Howden, so I'm forever grateful to that. So as the bug bit me, I got into karting at a young age with my parents' permission. My father wasn't very difficult to convince, but my mother was. So I started here in the Bay Area, up at Sears Point. When I was 10 years old, I had my first day in a go-kart in a place called Stockton, in the Motorplex there, which is, I think, still there, but no one races on it anymore. So I grew up in the Bay Area, racing up at Sears Point. My father would take me up He would occasionally bunk me off at school without my mum knowing, take me up to the go-kart circuit, and his favourite was in January, when the weather would become terrible. It would rain cats and dogs. We get worse weather here in January when it rains properly than we have in the UK. And my dad always told me as a kid, the rain separates the men from the boys. So he said, one day, when you get old enough, we'll start going out at Sears Point. I loved the idea of that until we started doing it. So what would happen, we'd go up to Sears Point in January, Exhibit A. That's not my first time, because my first time I didn't have a wetsuit. It was a lot colder than with a wetsuit. My father would take me up, and I could never understand why no one else would be up there in January. The circuit was completely empty. I think, wow, this is great. No one's going to be in the way. So we'd go up, and my father would conveniently forget the wet tyres at home, put me out on slicks, and I think I did about, if I even completed a lap before coming in and telling him, this is awful, let's go home, I don't want to do this. And he stood there, my mum gave us a flask of hot chocolate in the morning, and to keep both of us warm. So my father would stand in the pro shop with a hot chocolate, and I'd come in, I'd say to him, okay, that's enough, I want to come in now. And he'd say, do you want some hot chocolate? I said, yeah. He said, okay. This is just to go back, my voice is a bit shaky, this is my PTSD, child abuse story, or I consider it that. I'd say, yeah, I'd love some hot chocolate, I want to come. Okay, give me 5 quick laps, you have to stay on the circuit, they have to be consistent, and then you can come have your hot chocolate. So we'd go the entire day and I wouldn't get any hot chocolate. At the end of the day, I'd have my water would be running down my nose, I'd be blue, I'd be very cold, and I'd eventually get that hot chocolate, and it took more and more time before I absolutely loved the rain. And I still now, he said, one day you'll thank me when you get older and it starts to rain. I'm still waiting for that day. Here is, in Arizona, the keen eyes amongst you, if any IndyCar fans in the room, we raced all over America. I grew up when I was about 12, 13 years old. I got my first professional drive with a team called CRG, and I was picked up by PSL. And at the time, the goal was Formula One, and everything was realistic back then because I didn't understand the politics and how it actually worked. And so I started racing for PSL. This is my first race with them in Tucson. It was one of the most important weekends of my life because my father said to me, it's your first professional drive, you have to hit your marks. And the mechanics didn't make it very easy on us because I qualified on pole, and anyone that's done Arizona in January time, it's especially cold. And go-karts aren't allowed to run cool, we have to run water. So we came the next morning to find our number 1 race engine had frozen overnight and it had cracked. And so, yeah, I don't know if that was a bit in my head, but we put the number 2 engine in, which was still a rocket ship compared to any other stuff we had before then. And so, what did I do? I went out in the race and I crashed on the first lap. So, come to the final, I started 17th, and it was up until quite recently. It was my favourite race of my life. I won from 17th on the grid. The field are now some current IndyCar drivers, but it was just the most memorable moment up at that point. And that was really the beginning of karting. And so I ended up racing all over America. We lived out of suitcases. We cooked sausages in kettles because my father and I still don't know how to cook. So my lovely mother's always taking care of us. So yeah, we grew up in America, kind of grew up together racing go-karts, and it was the greatest childhood I could have asked for. And unfortunately, when you get to about 13, 14 years old, with great success, I raced for the US national team alongside Enzo Fittipaldi there. We had great memories, some not so great memories, places we've been to that we wouldn't go to again, but nonetheless, just the greatest thing you can do. I'm extremely fortunate, and I know a lot of young kids that aren't not just in a position to go karting with their children, but their parents don't feed them the passion that I was given as a kid. It's very unfortunate that they get it later in life. But so karting for me was a fantastic journey as a kid. So after karting, essentially you need to move up the ladder. You need to move on to something. And after I turned 14, I lost my professional drive with PSL, and then suddenly it became all on my father's shoulders. And sadly, funding is about 200 grand a year if you want to be competitive, because there's no point doing it unless you're competitive. So we had to stop at that point, unfortunately, and I wanted to move into single-seaters. And at that stage, there wasn't really a journey over here, at least. And at 14 years old, I thought to myself, I'm not giving up on this. It's still my absolute passion. So I waited a few years until I relocated to the UK. My parents, I went through high school here in Pleasanton, a place called Foothill High. And I didn't tell my parents that I was planning this all along. But when I turned 18, I moved to the UK. I planned all this out for several years. This is a quick snippet I had of this one. This is one of my dad's. This was your screensaver for a number of years. This was, this is at Kinsman Car Club in Dixon. And my father, we started with essentially any advice you get from someone when you're starting go-karts is, it's not great advice, because they just want to sell you the latest and greatest equipment. So we started with a slightly big chassis, 950mm, which never suited me. I was very small when I was a kid. My parents started feeding me when I was about 15, so I shot up overnight. So this was one of my father's favourites. He told me that being quick is fantastic, but it won't get you anywhere. If you want to go somewhere, you need to be consistent. So this is a picture of my Micron when I was 13 years old. So I did 10 laps to the thousandth of a second the same. And so I was given lots of hot chocolate on that day. So, as I say, I moved to the UK. When I was 18, I planned all along. I moved about a week after high school. I booked a one-way ticket to the UK with no idea what I was going to do. But there was a British Grand Prix coming up, and I'd never been to a Grand Prix, so I wanted to go. I didn't have a ticket. I managed to blag myself a job working at the Grand Prix. And the fantastic situation was, my auntie was working at Silverstone at the time, so I got very close to her just before that, and she got me a job, serving cups of tea. My father told me when I was a kid, if you can serve a good cup of tea and you can sweep a floor, you'll get anywhere you want in the world. So, it must have been a really good cup of tea, because I managed to talk my way into a test with an F3 team, thanks to the help of Howden, who was there at the weekend. I explained to him my ambitions. I was the same age as him when he moved to the UK to pursue racing. And so, I got a test with a British F3 team and started off, phoned my father, said, can you send my kit over? I've got a test coming up. And went along to Donington Park, and of course at that age, you can be a bit more naive and think this is the beginning of the trip to Formula One. And my F3 test went extremely well. I hadn't sat in a car before, and I was 0.8 of a second quicker than the team's current driver. Wow. So they asked the essential question, can you find £250,000? Yeah, of course. I didn't know where, but I started phoning around, managed to pull together some good sponsors. I committed with the team. We started testing before the 2020 season. Unfortunately, something significant which I didn't see coming happened in 2020, and COVID overnight completely put the mockers on that. So, not wanting to give up on racing, I thought, well, if I just do this for fun for a few years, work alongside, see if I can get a drive in Formula Fords. And I managed to get a drive in a historic Formula Ford, which wasn't my ambition. I wanted to race modern cars. But one of the teams, the modern teams, were very keen on having me in their car until they found out I'd only driven go-karts. And they stopped calling me at that point. And then I realised the only way in I'll get in a car is by racing historic cars. And I'm very glad I did, because it landed me a seat in Formula Fords racing all over the UK. So I raced, the car there is a 1972 Merlin Mark 20A, a fantastic Formula Ford, very popular in the UK. It's essentially, for those of you who are Crosswell Cup heads here, it's like the Titan for us limeys. It's a fantastic car, and I cut my teeth in this. I raced all over the UK. I worked at all the different circuits as a driver coach, just to try and get as much seat time as possible. So this is really where I cut my teeth. It's a 4-speed 1600cc, cross-flight tyres, a really wonderful car. And then I remember the last round of the championship at Mallory Park, sitting in the car, thinking to myself, oh, these metal lines are quite hot. And I started to wiggle my feet and think, what am I doing sitting in this car? I wanted to go racing in GT cars. I wanted to go racing in single seaters, and I'm sitting in a 50-something-year-old car, risking my life. And that was when I realised it was the wrong move going into these. So I went into all the 60s stuff, got into earlier, you could say more unsafe stuff. But 60s, I got into Formula. I went from Formula Fords. I had my first drive in a sports car. This is anyone that's been up to the Monterey Historics in the last couple of years may have seen this car. So I was very fortunately invited to drive this car by a big supporter of mine who's actually here in the room as well, sat at the table, a very good friend of mine, Georgios Papadopoulos. And Georgios asked me to drive the car at Velocity Invitational a few years ago at Laguna Seca, just after my Formula Ford season in the UK. And so I did. My father said this was his favourite racing car of all time. To me it was pretty, but I didn't know much more about it than that. And so this is I've got some videos. I don't want to bore all of you to death with my voice the whole time. But I've got some onboards and some videos in case some people might want to see what it's like to drive one of these cars. So, I'll play a quick clip. A wise man once said, a wise man once told me, you don't drive a low salam, you wear it. And I think you can see why he said that. My father owned, as a kid, he had the Bahama Speed Weeks winning low salam, so it's a car that's very special to me. And they are giant killers, really. And I've had a great amount of fun in this car. We've raced against a lot of V8 Cobras, had some memorable races at Laguna Seca and Historics over the years. They are just a superb car. One of the things I've loved, I didn't want to start in historic racing. In fact, I told my father a number of years ago it wasn't what I was going to do. And then I quickly ate my words because I wanted to do some racing. The time I've spent behind the wheel of some of these cross-fly tyre cars has been the absolute most fun. I've since then driven a lot of modern GT cars, and the enjoyment you get when I drive little GT cars, you're there to do a job, and that's all. When you get inside one of these, it's very similar. There's something very special about the fact you drive one of these cars and it feels like someone's almost pointing a gun at you saying, if you mess up, you might kill yourself. So it's quite a good reason not to mess up. The times I've had in these cars have been some of the greatest, not just the Elan, but all the 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s cars. I have to promise you, if I had an open face helmet, you'd see I always have a big smile on my face the whole time I'm driving. It's, the Elan has been a very special car. This is it on the lawn at Quail. We had a great race a couple of years ago, Philip Kadori, as well as Jim Farley, in the V8 Cobras, where we won both days. But there was nothing in it, because the 1600cc engine, what it loses down the straights, it's great, so when I get to the corners I don't slow down. So it ends up making a fantastic dice, almost like a David and Goliath battle, if you will. This one, I was not sure whether I played or not, but I thought, seeing the car outside, you'll get a good idea of what it's like to drive one of these 1962 Formula Juniors. It's only 1100cc, and it's only 130-ish horsepower, but it's also one of the greatest racing cars ever. This is also one of my favourite laps I've ever done, that's recorded at least, that I wanted to share. One of the things that I think, if you pay attention to with the car, you might enjoy. The tyres on these Formula Juniors, they're extremely hard, they have no grip. When you go through a high-speed corner, the car understeers and it won't turn in. If you push hard enough and trust that the car isn't going to go off the circuit, it will actually grip. And there's a couple of tricks I've learned over the years from Howden specifically. This is why I talk about his connection to Bruce McLaren. He was taught as a young man that if you skip a gear on the way down, which I'm sure a lot of the drivers in here will have done over the years, but I'm still learning. If you skip a gear on the way down, it saves quite a lot of lap time. Just go, for example, from 5th straight down to 3rd, rather than 5th, 4th, 3rd. So it's this is the first time, this is a qualifying lap at Alton Park. Interestingly, just before the race. I'll tell a bit of a story of the race afterwards. But the car, if you pay attention to steering through a couple of the high-speed corners, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about with regards to tyre grip. Or lack of. If you watch closely here, just the steering wheel, you can see the amount of lock you can give at speed.
When you shop in the Safeway app,
Thank you. So that's the car that's parked outside right now. So a really fantastic thing. So this race, I qualified on pole. The reason I'm giving the background here, you might like this story. I qualified on pole, and then my father's about 5,000 miles away here in California, and he was just waking up, as always, at about 2 a.m. to watch me race, sneaking downstairs to listen to the commentary. And of course, as any of you been to the UK might know, has anyone here ever spent a summer in the UK? Yeah? I don't think I've ever spent a summer in the UK. There was no such thing as summer in the UK. This is a lovely July afternoon in Cheshire, near Manchester. You can see the conditions. The sun's up there somewhere. The heavens opened up as we set out onto the formation lap. So, as you can imagine, we're all on a lot of the field in the UK. It's very competitive. Formula Junior is one of the most competitive series. It goes all around the world. It really is a terrific series, and it's every year the grids are sold out, and it's always the same people, and there's a reason why. It's because the racing is fantastic at the front, all the way through the field. So just before the race, we went out on a completely dry setup, as you do, when it's raining. Everyone was in the same situation, and it just went extremely well for me because I made a very good start, and I was leading by 8 seconds at the end of the first lap, and I was quite comfortable, and I just brought the car home after that. And my father phones me up and says, "Well, you can come in for your hot chocolate now." So, made me, it was quite an emotional one. Finally, after all those years, it actually paid off, but I'm still not going to say thank you. So, 2023 was a fantastic year. That was the year I raced in the Formula Junior, raced in the Elan. We did about, I'd say, just shy of 50 races in the season. The highlight of the year being I spent 5 weekends in 5 different countries at 5 new circuits, probably in 3 cars. Sometimes it's a double-header weekend where I'll drive the Formula Junior and then I'll jump in the Elan 10 minutes later. And a lot of people will ask, with these cars, when you get one, how do you change your mind to drive a single-seater versus a sports car? And to me, they're all 4 tyres and a gearbox, and they all go in the same direction. But I think the key difference, my heroes, I'm only 25, but my heroes, Jim Clark, Dan Gurney, Graham Hill, Jackie Stewart, some of the greats to me were not the guys that got in the Formula 1 cars every weekend and were great and said what the team told them to say and just drove to a tyre strategy. My heroes got in 3-4 cars in a weekend and they won in every single car. And to me, that is the most important thing. You have to be able to get in anything, and you have to be able to figure it out on your 2nd or 3rd lap. Because any time beyond that it's just doing it for fun. Which, with the historic racing, as much as I absolutely adore the cars, but it's been a way of sharpening my craft. And in fact, it's actually worked out quite well over the years, because a lot of people don't view someone that comes up through historic racing as someone that's actually a redeemable driver when you get into a modern GT car. But I started in modern cars and then got into historic racing and found out why it's so fantastic. So I was racing at Silverstone in 2023, and anyone that's owned a Lotus over the years knows what Lotus stands for. It's lots of trouble, usually serious. Lotus broke. And I had a lovely gentleman a good friend of mine who I met through historic racing, invited me out to come and join him in a place called Lime Rock Park. I was walking in the garages with my father, admiring the car, and it was Graham Hill's BRM. And he came up to me and he said, we've spent a lot of time together in the paddocks in the past, he and his wife. And he said to me, "Are you doing Lime Rock Park next weekend?" And I said, "No, I don't know where Lime Rock Park is." And he said, "Well, do you want to come drive my F2 car?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll see you on Thursday." So I flew out to Connecticut, to New York, and then got a hire car and drove as crazily as possible to the circuit. I had a drive in a weekend which was starting in a Repco Brabham Formula 2 car from 1968. And the history behind the car, it was a bit, to me, it was still quite special. It was Kurt Aaron's chassis, and it was the car that qualified on pole at Hockenheim in '68 for the F2 race, and that was in fact the race that Jim Clark was killed in. So it was a bittersweet car to drive, but still very special to drive something of that power and that magnitude. So I drove the car at Lime Rock Park, and then went very well, it broke. And then got into another car of his, a Chevron E36 Can-Am car. The reason for this story, you might notice that's what a gear shifter, well, that's not what a gear shifter should look like, that's what gear shifter looked like on the first lap. It broke off in my hands. And after the Brabham broke, Graham said to me, "Do you fancy driving my Chevron?" And I said, "I do actually, yeah." And I sat in the car 5 minutes before the race started. The Brabham broke, and I jumped in the Chevron. I remember I was even thinking to myself, "Gosh, is this stupid? I've not sat in it. I don't know where the gears are." And I had my helmet on, so no one could see I was thinking about it. Graham turned quite purple, I think, because I said yes so quickly. So I sat in the Chevron, and 5 minutes later jumped in it. On the first lap, the gear shifter broke, unfortunately. Not one to give up. I still drove around with a broken gear shifter, and you'll see in the video, I'm actually holding the remains of the gear shifter in my hand, just as a bit of a prize to say to him afterwards, look what happened. So I'll play a quick clip. This is also my first time ever around Lime Rock Park.
File free in the
This
app
is it.
if you didn't file with us.
You can see the gear shifter in my left hand. Would have made a great video of this. So that was my first time ever in a Slicks and Wings car, other than the F3 car. I had never sat in it. I'd never driven or raced a Slicks and Wings car. So it was a fantastic experience. And someone told me afterwards that the lap that I did was an average of 106 miles an hour. So glad I didn't know that at the time. I probably would have done it. The whole weekend I got to drive a Lotus 23 as well as a Ginetta G4R. So some really spectacular cars. And this is all this is Connecticut, so I raced at the Nürburgring, followed by Laguna Seca, Connecticut, the Goodwood Revival, and then Castle Coombe, all in the space of 5 weekends. So it was a really, really fantastic memory. So afterwards, again, this is the Lotus 22 that you've seen outside. So, has anyone here been to the Goodwood Revival? Have you been? Yeah. It is really a once in a lifetime. You have to do it. It should be on your bucket list. It's one of the greatest racing events in the world. Just to put it into perspective, even when I'm not racing, I still go back just to spectate. I absolutely adore the event. And there's something about it, when you go there, it's like a time warp. You go into a time machine and you're back in the 1960s. So I was fortunate enough, I was racing the 22. We were invited, again, I was driving the car for Art Car Club, and it was 60 years to I think it was to the weekend on the anniversary of the car winning the Formula Junior Championship in period. And when I first started driving the car, I managed to get in touch with the chap who raced it in period, Tommy Reed. And he's now I think he's about 93 or 94 years old, but still very, very sharp. And he, in fact, was watching this race live. I forgot to send him the live stream, but someone sent it to him and he watched it live, and I found out afterwards. So I'll just play a quick highlight of this at Goodwood Revival.
To the front row drivers of Horatio Fitzsimon, Sam Wilson and Chris Goodwin. It's all about getting into Magic Corner in the front, or at the front of the pack. So here is our pole starter, car number 68, Horatio Fitzsimon, and he was car owned by Georgios Papadopoulos, and it won the Irish Formula Junior title in the Eringsville 1963. Tommy Reed at the wheel. So can he go on to glory here today in the Chichester Cup?
So in the 68, he is alongside the Navy, and we were seeing that car being fueled up a few moments ago and getting the morning
This looks
coffee.
like
There
a
you
period
go,
photo
alongside
when the
Sam
starts line up
Wilson
all the
parking the
cars.
53.
Really
Nice
spectacular.
distinctive change of livery at the front for our drivers.
Barriers are
All
period
driving
tracks too.
Lotuses. We await the green flag at the back, and then all eyes on the green. Look to the right, look to the flag. Here's the signal. Here come the Reds. They're rowing to about 9,500, and we go racing off the line as the flag falls at Goodwood. And we're racing for the first time today down to Magic Corner as they all leave the line in various different conditions. And it's a pole sitter, Horatio Fitzsimon, who confirms pole into holding the lead in the turn one, as there's a wide moment there in the background. Now it was the lead coming out of Magic Corner. Might be about to change as they head down to Fordwater.
Yeah, different lines there, and certainly Sam Wilson in second place was taking a look in the second part of Madrid, but it's all about going through Fordwater there. It's not a corner, it's a kick. Now they get Sam Wilson taking a look out the inside, but that will put him on the outside. The second part of the story, and let's see how that unfolds in front of Chris Goodwin in third place, but our top start, Horatio Fitzsimon, has done the hard work, but that was about the most equal start I've seen. The first shot, Alex, the car left the grid. There was no advantage to any of them, but by the time they got to the first corner, I didn't think on the inside line, Horatio Fitzsimon held off the lead.
Oh, off in the background, big moment there to drop to the rear of the field. The 87 is heading down the order. We go back to the battle for the lead then. Horatio Fitzsimon's checking the left mirror and the right mirror. That's a great run as we go down Monauban Straight. And is that a change? No, they're still running close together. This is very, very close. And Horatio Fitzsimon stays ahead. Great battling. Not what we wanted to see.
Well, that's Peter Lair off in one of the world's bravest. That's that Frank Gardner car, but all lines on the front. It's as close to being slightly right from the other chicane. Horatio Fitzsimon should be quite solid in the power. It's going to be a chance for Sam Wilson. In second place to put his tiny little car behind the other tiny little car. Well, I'm afraid my little cod theory that Clive Richards might be catching them has been thrown out the window. With the first two, Fitzsimon and Wilson just pulling away a little bit, but I thought as they fought he might catch up, but in terms of natural pace, those two cars from first and second on the grid clearly have it. The big question is who's going to finish ahead. We're halfway through this race, just over halfway through. Horatio Fitzsimon still leading in the number 68 Lotus, but another challenge in the Acuri Tomahawk car. That's the black one with the orange stripe, and Sam Wilson taking a look, but hey, who's clever? Horatio Fitzsimon. If you're going round, you're going round the outside, you're going the long way.
Oh, they are glued together as they come round Woodcote Corner into the chicane. Now this is where Fitzsimon has got wide in recent laps, and you can see he's fighting it once again.
And the last thing you want to do is get sideways, but he leaves the corner as fast as he can. I think that was the mistake. They will give the slingshot, and there it comes. But can Sam Wilson convert it? He is on the outside. He's carrying full speed. It's Patrick. It's a two-part corner. He's got to hang it. No, it's not going to work. I must say, huge admiration for Horatio Fitzsimon. He's very, very convincing that he is on the right line, happy to stay there. Sam Wilson, he has won many, many races at Goodwood. He's having to work super hard to try and another here, and we are the beneficiaries of that fabulous racing.
Putting out of the slipstream, trimming a bit of the grass, but still no momentum. That's a rapid car in terms of grunt for Horatio Fitzsimon. And he is in all sorts of trouble coming out of the final chicane, but he's doing enough by the time that he gets out of Management Corner, and it's just enough.
And only 1 point on the lap to get it loose. That's the exit of the chicane as you picked up, Alex. But everywhere else, Horatio Fitzsimon so super smooth, which you have to be. These 1100cc Ford engines, breathed on as they were, do not have a lot of grunt, and it's all about precision. One little mistake can cost you enormously, but right now, we're almost side by straight, down the left straight, again, on the outside, as before. Is it going to be a carbon copy, or can Sam Wilson this time get around? And boy, don't they move over the bumps.
He is trying to sweep in. Oh, they did make contact. I think there was a better touch there between the leading pair as they went through Woodcote Corner. They are leaving it all on the line at the moment. Here's the should have applied the power. There's more dust kicked off, and that was the closest we've come to contact between Fitzsimon and Wilson.
The damage is still in the back of the car if you really walk out.
Where the tail comes out for Horatio Presentation. But look at this move. The tail on the 68 Lotus is about to come swinging round. And a double adjustment of position. Yes, you can just see the nose on the 53 Lotus being given a little bit of a push into the air.
But we go back to our race leaders, and they have put on such a performance, the pair of them. It has been great defence from Fitzsimon. It has been look after look after look for Sam Wilson, but he hasn't ever been able to find his way by. He's had sucks to the inside. He's had a bit of contact to this corner, but Horatio Fitzsimon has weathered the storm all the way round. Can he get the power down at the very end? They're going to be so close over the line, which is the ending that this race deserves. What a display from both of them. But it's Horatio Fitzsimon. Across the line by 1/10 of a second.
I hope that wasn't too difficult to watch, Pat. George, I'm sorry. It's in good hands, I promise. One of my favourite things with historic racing, when you go in these 60-something-year-old cars, as they are now, a grid like Goodwood Revival. Mummy, you shouldn't listen to this story. I was thrown out of class when I was a kid because when Goodwood Revival would come on, I would be studying, of course, as well as watching it on my phone at the same time. And I remember being thrown out of class because I spent more time watching my phone watching Goodwood when I was a kid. And it was my engineering teacher. In fact, I told my engineering teacher when I won at Goodwood what had happened. I said to him, "Do you remember how I was always on my phone?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Do you remember what I was watching?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, I was watching a race that I just won." And he wasn't as enthusiastic as I thought he was. I still passed engineering with flying colours. So yeah, Goodwood is a spectacular event because for someone like myself, I was at Revival, I was 23, and I had a very blank CV for the most part, and I was very fortunate to race there against the likes of Alex Brundle, Chris Goodwin, who was Aston Martin's test driver, as well as McLaren's former test driver, all sorts of Clive Richards, very seasoned racers, and to be able to compete with them, essentially in historic cars, which are an equal playing field, is a really special thing. And I think that's an area where someone of my age getting into historic racing that does it essentially on passion as well as ambition, to be able to race with people that you look up to so much and be able to go out and be wheel to wheel, and especially Sam Wilson, we've had some good battles over the last couple of years. To race with guys like that, I think a lot of historic racers don't go any further in historic racing. It's a bit of a shame because some of them, whether it was politics, whether it was the money, you get to a certain area where in motorsport, talent only gets you so far. You have to be able to produce not just results, you need to be able to find the backing in order to do it. And essentially the reason I got into historic racing was because we didn't have the money to do Formula 3, go up the single-seater ladder, and it was still a fantastic way of being able to enjoy my life and also doing what I love and being around people that I really admire. And I've been very fortunate to not just race with them, but get to know quite a lot of them at a very, very high level. One of our favourites who we lost last year is Jochen Mass, and that was one of the sad parts of last year. But after I raced the Chevron at Lion Rock Park, I was very happy to send him an email telling the story of it. And if anyone, I'm sure lots of people in this room must have met Jochen over the years, and he was one of the funniest people. I don't think he'd get very far in racing these days because his sense of humour was just hilarious. And I think that was something that's a lot of the drivers lack nowadays in personality. I find a lot of them to be like footballers. I'm talking English football, not proper football. I find a lot of the characters, unfortunately, these days, we need someone who is a bit of an outlier. But I'm going to get off my soapbox, I'll go too far with that. But a couple of other people who I've spoken to already today, I've seen this clip. This was the Velocity Invitational here at Sears Point in 2023. This was the end of my 2023 season. Again, I was very fortunate to race the Elan and against the big boys. This is Rob Walton, in his beautiful mustard 250LM, and that's Gunner Jeanette in the lovely Miles Collier Reds Institute 250LM. And we had a great scrap, Gunner and I, in the second race. And so I'll play a quick clip of that. Just to put into perspective, the 250LM is real. I promise there was a lot more space than it looks from the TV. Trust me, I was very worried about that too. So one of the most important things that I've learned in motorsport, especially historic racing, which attracts a lot of fabulous personalities and very successful people, over the years I've tried to talk to as many people as possible, like throughout my years of traveling, going to all sorts of amazing corners of the world. I've made sure I read up on people. I grew up reading all the motor racing literature. My father, how old was I when you used to teach me all the Formula One drivers of the 60s, what their faces were? I think I correct you now. I always try to talk to as many different characters as I can, because I know that at the end of the day, networking, it's great doing well, but if you're not speaking to people and they don't know, it doesn't matter. And fortunately, when I was 18, I first worked in the British Racing Drivers Club, serving cups of tea. I met a gentleman there who every week, whenever I'd go out on my mountain bike riding in Sunol, I would listen to his podcast. And I met him at the Grand Prix, and I said to him, his name is Peter Windsor. He's a very successful Formula One team manager, world champion with, I believe it was Nigel Mansell. And in fact, I was just talking to him tonight. He was in the car even with Sir Frank Williams when he had his accident. He's a great personality and a thesaurus of knowledge. So Peter, I met him and I said to him, I'm a big fan of your podcast. I want to go and I want to become a professional racing driver. Can you help me? So I have no idea how I can do that. And I said, great, can I have your phone number and I'll just send you messages? And he said, of course. So over the years we've kept in touch, and Peter has been generous with his time to me and talk to me frequently. and I'd always send him emails, my latest races, what I'm up to. And this year we raced in the Lorani Trophy, in fact in a car. I'm not sure if he's a regular Lunch Bunch member, but a gentleman by the name of Dr. Nick Collivas. Does anyone know Nick? So Nick, yeah, so he's a fantastic car owner, lots of Formula 1 cars, and I was phoning around, this is at the end of 2023, we were trying to find a Brabham BT6 Formula Junior, Georges and myself, because the Lotus 22, it was very pretty, and red's a great colour, but it's not as quick as a Brabham, and that's what matters. So we were trying to find a BT6, and unfortunately I think there were something like 20 made originally. So I phoned around and Dr. Nick answered the phone, and I met him a couple of times, and essentially I said to him, "You've not done anything with that car." He's had it something like 20 years. And I said, we want to race it in Europe, and the car will go and it will be regularly raced. And he said, okay, I don't want to sell it, but if that's the situation and you'll get the car back out, absolutely, I'd love to see it. So we revived the car. 60 years to its debut, 60 years later, it debuted at Alton Park in '63. The gentleman by the name of Paul Hawkins, who, as some of you may know who that is, he's got a fantastic book which Gary Horscourt brought in, Hawkeye. And Paul, unfortunately, he was racing in the era where drivers died. Paul raced this car in the UK in '63. It was kind of his first year in professional motorsport. And it is the car that landed him his big drive in Formula 1, which he was very successful, not so much in results, but in getting good media, because he landed a Lotus in the harbour of Monaco, which gets you good press. And unfortunately, that's one of the things he's mostly known for. But Paul was a very successful sports car racer. He raced Lola T70s. He in fact won in a Porsche 910 at the time of Florio, so a terrific guy. And from what I understand, a very colourful personality, and he liked his swear words. But he was a very successful driver and raced this car in '63. So this was in Oregon. Mark Blaze had it at his shop. My father and I, we drove up 1,000 miles in one day, there and back, picked it up, dropped it off at the port, and then we took the car to the UK. Again, this car belonged to Art Car Club. It was restored, and then it made its debut at Alton Park last year, where it's one of the fastest cars I've ever driven, but it's also having, I don't know if it's a bit cursed, but we've had so many small issues with it over the last year, with gearboxes and whatnot. This is the beginning of the season this year at Paul Ricard in the south of France. This was the first round of the Lorani Trophy, and you can see one of my favourite things, because I actually enjoy what I do driving these cars. When I get home, I like to rewatch my videos. So I like to attach a camera to the front of my helmet. And so I like to share that with a lot of people that follow my social media. So this is one of the clips. I recorded this, and the qualifying was still going on. So I came in, I qualified on pole, and I was so excited to watch the video back. I didn't want to go and do another lap. I wanted to go and watch that lap. I came in, I downloaded it on my phone, and I sent it over to my friend Peter Windsor. And Peter was so enamored by it, and he said, "This is just fantastic. Would you mind if I share this on my YouTube?" And I said, "I would really appreciate it. You know, I've been trying to get into modern racing. Anything that can help me give me some kind of platform, I would greatly appreciate." So this is a clip that Peter did on me and the Brabham in the BT6. So this is at Paul Ricard in the south of France. So I'll just play this clip.
My dad,
It's the wetsuit.
It's got my I don't know, just got my adrenaline going. There's a guy, you probably haven't heard of him. Well, you might have heard of him because he's doing very well in historic racing now. A young Englishman, American, a bit of both really. Horatio Presentation, who, get around the name, because it's a great name actually, if you think about it. There's some good people called Horatio in the history of the world. And
He started like most in karts, very, very quick in everything he's ever done. But because there's always this big brick wall of what you're going to do, how you get into, how you make the big break into international motor racing, he's kind of gone into historic racing. And he's unbelievably quick and spectacular, and really has a feel for the cars he's driving as well, and drives some great cars. From Lotus 22s to Lotus 26Rs, which is the lightweight Elan. I think this weekend he's driving a Ferrari 275 GTB at Hockenheim, and he'll be quick in it for sure. And most notably, a Brabham BT6 Formula Junior 63 car, which was actually run by Ian Walker Racing, the famous British race team of the time, driven by Paul Hawkins, and won at Rouen in 63 a round of the Formula Junior Championship, European Championship. Very, very nice car, one of the early Brabham Toronac cars, beautiful handling, 63 Formula Junior, quick car for its time. Anyway, he's been doing very well on that. And if you want to get to his website, I'll put the details in the description after this video. Horatio Presentation. He's got a video, an onboard of him at the Alton Park Gold Cup, in which he starts last for whatever reason, some drama in qualifying. In other words, he's 33rd on the grid, and he wins the race on the last lap. It's the most incredible thing. Anyway, even better than that, I think, is a recent video he's put out of his onboard of a pole lap he got at Ricard recently in the BT6. And it was a new lap record as well, track record I think they call it if it's the pole. And he won the race as well. And I'm going to show that in a second, but just as a quick intro, this is what he looks like in the 26R. I'm just saying a few words.
We moved to California when I was 2, and I was introduced to motor racing at this circuit at the Monterey Historics.
Now, as a build-up to what we're going to see in this Ricard lap, Paul Hawkins was, as I say, the original driver of that BT6 for Ian Walker Racing. And Paul was a tough Australian, an international. We never saw him as a local out in Australia in the 60s. He very quickly moved to Europe and did very well, famous for, of course, putting a private Lotus 33 into the water in Monaco in 65 in the Grand Prix, but he survived that. But he was very quick when he was on it. And as I've been talking about him relatively recently, about his driving of Ford GT40 in 67, when he was up against Denny Hulme, when he won the Autosport GT Championship that year. Admittedly, the car was a little bit lighter than the Sid Taylor car, but Paul was really quick, have no doubt about that. And he came out to Australia in 68 in just out of the blue, really. It was a September meeting, Warwick Farm, and he suddenly appeared in a GT race in a Jackie Epstein owned, and Jackie Epstein was a good buddy of his and a car owner, former driver as well, actually. Lotus T70 Mark IIIB. So I just couldn't believe it. There was Paul Hawkins, and that's him in the jacket. So I took that picture of him. He's talking to Pete Gagan there, Ian Gagan. And there's the Lotus T70 Mark IIIB that he drove. He did very well in it too. Drove it beautifully, very, very polished. Sadly, he lost his life in 69 in a car like that, not actually that car. But, you know, that's what happened in those days. Very, very sad. Anyway, Horatio got more and more interested when he was asked to drive this BT6, which is owned by a company called ART in the States, I believe. And he went onto eBay, and he actually found this picture on eBay of Paul Hawkins sitting in the BT6. And it's actually signed by Paul, as you can see there. Really nice, eh? So that was that. And now let's join. This is one lap of Ricard. I'm not going to talk over it. All you hear is the engine noise. This will give you a feel for what it was like in 63, when we had no aerodynamics on the car, pretty narrow tires. The cars were very light and jumping from bump to bump. Required great skill, finesse, and car control. But overtaking was definitely possible. You didn't need anything to help you do your overtaking. And everything just seemed in proportion. They just seemed really nice. Obviously nice, manual gear change, heel and toe. And it's quite difficult sometimes to get a feel for what that's really like. And I think all of us can benefit. I don't want to in any way sound patronizing. I think all race fans can benefit by having a look at this, just to see what it was actually like for race drivers back in the 60s with no aero. And admittedly, this is a Formula Junior car, but you'll see from the lap that it is very quick. And you'll see how much energy that Horatio puts into the car and how well he drives it. and how sideways he is everywhere. We get to the laps, the long Ricard lap, the Grand Prix circuit, and you go down the straight, there's a chicane, and then they go in towards Scene, a very, very fast right-hander. And he goes in, he just has a slight lift, and then the back end just comes out, and he has a big oversteer slide. Absolutely brilliant. So I won't talk over it anymore, I won't talk about it anymore, I'll just let you watch it. But this lap begins as he comes out of the last corner, and he's got a bit of opposite lock on straight away. So enjoy this. A lap of Ricard in a 1963 Formula Junior driven, Brabham BT6, driven absolutely on the limit by Horatio Fitzsimon.
This is the hearing aid secret your insurance company doesn't want you to know about. You've seen those hearing aid prices, right? 4,000.
Isn't that brilliant? You see the oversteers, he went into Scene everywhere really. I mean, just sliding the car. I can't think of any racing driver in the world, even current Formula One guys, who watching that wouldn't think, yeah, this is brilliant. It sums everything up about, well, obviously about that era, but also about, you can really see how a racing driver can work, a very good racing driver has to work in the cockpit of a car. And yeah, Max is he's doing similar things, but in much smaller degree, because everything is shrouded by downforce. All the same dynamics are in play. It's just that it's so much more visible with that. And Horatio, what a driver. For sure this guy's got a future in, I don't know, going to win Le Mans and all that, probably in that part of motorsport, I would imagine. I can't think of any decent team that wouldn't be on the phone to him right now. He's that good. But I just hope he never loses that touch with historic racing, because he's so good. And he drives those cars so well. Just breathtaking. I hope you enjoyed that. It was, and a big thanks to him as well for letting me use that video of the car. Really, really good.
Thank you very much. I want to just go off topic for a second with that video. That car is the 63 Bravo. We have had all sorts of weird things with it over the last couple of years. Its first race at Alton Park we've had a number of issues where, when I first drove it, I first raced it at Alton, we had an issue with a fuel pressure regulator where it cut out in qualifying, hence why I ended up 33rd. And the head gasket blew in the race, but it blew just in time where I managed to get the lead on the last lap, and the head gasket blew right at the end, and it was just in time for us to be able to win. And this year, a very strange, similar situation happened at, this is a picture of it at Maggots and Beckett's at Silverstone, slightly sideways, where we've been chasing the last few years with that Lotus outside as well. The kind of the crown jewel outside of Goodwood is to win the Silverstone Festival, or the Classic as it was once called. And we managed to do it this year with the Brabham in very similar circumstances, where on my first lap I started from pole position and I made a brilliant start and stayed out of trouble. And at the end of the first lap I went in for top gear. And anyone that's ever driven with a young teenager learning manual knows what it feels like when they don't use the clutch, but they go into gear anyway. That's essentially what it felt like as I went into top gear. And I could tell the fifth gear on the first lap, I could feel it was stripped. So I thought, okay, I have to start managing that, be a bit more gentle in top gear. And every lap it was the same. The next lap it popped out of gear, so I had to hold it in place. And then on the very last lap, I've been leading that race 3 years in a row, and on the last lap had something mechanically fail on us, or myself in some circumstances. And this year, about 2 corners from the end, I thought, I can't believe it, it's finally, the curse is broken. And it was at that moment the gearbox actually fully popped out of gear, and it got stuck in 4th gear, and I lost all sorts of gear feel. And I thought, oh great, just as I could see the podium at that point. And the gearbox, essentially, what happened on the first lap, the 5th gear was stripped, and a couple of the dog rings had come off, and at that point they realised it was better to get out of the gearbox than it was to stay, so they punched a hole inside the gearbox, and actually it started to smoke. It looked very cool, but it didn't feel very good, and for the last 2 corners, the gearbox was running out of all oil, and it just made it across the line, and I lost my entire lead, but just crossed the line in first. And then the gearbox completely locked, but we won't talk about that. So it's a really strange thing with this car. It's been off the circuit for about 50 plus years, and we took it to Alton Park, and it's its first race, and it's a really strange thing where every time where there's a mechanical failure, a couple of times it's not been the case, as you know, Georges, where the car will brake just in time. And I think it's a Brabham, but I think it was Colin Chapman who said, any car which crosses the line and just falls apart is the perfect racing car. I'm paraphrasing slightly. I don't know if he was talking about a Brabham or a Lotus, but it's been very strange. The Lotus has been the more robust car. But yeah, so we managed to do it this year, and so I brought the trophy just here. Georges hasn't seen it in a couple of months, so I'd really like to see it. So yeah, that's the Brabham. So a big thank you to Peter Windsor, who's a big help and a big supporter of mine with that feature. And it's one of the things with historic racing, you get to see how essentially you can't hide behind driving aids, sharing a car with someone. That's one of the great things about these historic cars that I didn't realise when I was starting, but would end up working out in my favour. So the Silverstone Festival and this feature did extremely well for me. I ended up, just before going off to the end of the season, I got a call up to race at Le Mans, at historic Le Mans, but nonetheless in a Ferrari 750 Monza with a gentleman who I'm sure many of you know, Patrick Otis, and his son Tazio in the car. And my father is a Ferrari fanatic, and I absolutely adore Ferrari. We're tifosi since I was 12 and since he was 12. We've been Ferrari fanatics. And he was very excited. He came to Le Mans to watch. Unfortunately, it broke on the first lap going down the Mulsanne straight. So I didn't get to drive it. But a couple of months earlier at Hockenheim, when I was racing in Germany, I met a gentleman who I didn't actually know, but this is one of the great things with social media. He knew me from my onboards. And when I was eating lunch, came up to me, a very tall Danish chap whilst I was eating, and came up and said, "Are you Horatio?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I like your driving." I said, "Oh, thank you, I do too." He said, "Well, would you like to drive my car?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." "What is your car?" He said, "It is a Lotus 15. I said, "I'd love to drive it." He said, "Okay, come to Le Mans." So I got a second spare seat at Le Mans. We raced together in Germany, which went extremely well. The Lotus broke, strangely enough. Then after that, we went to Le Mans, and after the Ferrari mechanical failure, I got to sit in the 15. But unfortunately, going to Le Mans, it was a bucket list event for me, and it's my entire ambition in life is to win Le Mans. And this was just a taste of that. And as a kid, I grew up playing all the computer games, riding around Le Mans. And so going along, after the Ferrari broke down, I was a bit disappointed. And then I got to drive the 15. And my first lap, unfortunately, because it was a very last minute, the car was on the cancellation list. So I didn't get to drive the car until after qualifying in the evening. The owner was a little bit sceptical. I found out afterwards the owner was the Prince of Denmark, which I'm glad I didn't know that before I drove it, because that might change the way I drive the car. The Prince let me drive the car with the other driver, and my first lap was at 2:30 in the morning of Le Mans. So anyone that's been to Le Mans knows not only how fantastic the event is and how fantastic the food is, the darkness, there are no lights on the whole of the Mulsanne Straight except for the chicanes. Anyone here raced at Le Mans? Show of hands? No? Okay. So when you go down the Mulsanne Straight for the first time, it was 2:30 in the morning, and essentially in a 1959 sports car, the headlights are not headlights, they're more like candlesticks in the dark. The Lotus, when I went out, I thought, well, I don't want to get stuck behind slow cars, I want to find someone's good. So Emmanuel Pirot was there along with Andy Wallace. Andy Wallace is Bugatti's test driver, and he is I think a 2-time Le Mans winner in the gorgeous silk cut Jaguars. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll try and get in front of them and I'll hold them up enough where I can keep up with them. So going out the pits, Andy goes out in, it was a Jaguar D-type, a gentleman called Mike Hawthorne raced in period. It was the Le Mans winner of 55, so a car with a very dark history, but still spectacular. Andy went flying down the Porsche curves, under the Dunlop Bridge, and I thought if I can just see those brake lights enough, I can figure out which way around the circuit goes. Again, this is at 2:30 in the morning. I go down Mulsanne Straight the first time, and I can just see his brake lights in the distance, his running light, and I look in the mirror and I see these awful LEDs. They're a bit like this projector in my mirror, and it was the 250 GTO bread fan, and I don't think they ran LEDs in period, but they run them now. Flashing me, and it was going down Mulsanne, and I thought to myself, this is one of those moments in your life that you register, because one day you'll look back and go, did I really do that? And I was going down Mulsanne Straight thinking, okay, wherever Andy brakes, you brake 5 seconds later. He's a good distance in front of me. And so we're going and going, and I'm looking in the mirror thinking, this is the coolest thing I've ever done. Gosh, those lights are getting closer and closer. And it's completely pitch black, except you can see a blue circle in the distance. It gets closer and closer, and then the floodlights of the first chicane. As we get very close, I notice Andy is just carrying on, and I'm thinking, this is the first lap in this car. Do I really want to crash on my first lap? Probably not. So I keep going, and then at the last second I just back out of it, and thinking, gosh, he's very brave. And then suddenly this scent of rubber hits me, and I realise he's completely missed the first chicane. He's gone straight on. So I did get past him about 10 seconds later, but he just made the chicane, which I think if I'd tried, I probably wouldn't have done a great job on my first lap at night. Maybe in the daytime it's a different story. But we had a wonderful weekend. Unfortunately, because it was a very last-minute deal, the team didn't bring wet tyres. They only brought the Dunlops, which are essentially they're bad and dry, but they're even worse at night. Whereas a lot of the other cars use Avon compounds, or Nova as they are over here. So I've got a great onboard as well, which you can just see. The qualifying practice was dry, and then when it came time for the race, which was supposed to be at 11 p.m. It ended up being 4 a.m. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was absolutely frightened before the race because it was just, I'd not driven Le Mans at night, in the rain at least. I'd done probably 2 laps. It's about a 7-minute lap there in the rain, and I was quite frightened. And the car, I think we were 5th or 6th. We were right at the sharp end of a 90-car field. And the cars around me, very similar to the Revs Institute 250LM, they were worth a lot more than me. So I thought, maybe take it quite conservatively. But then I realised when you get into the circuit, some of the other guys at the front, the very experienced Le Mans veterans, they're in the same position you are, except they're much more wise than you, so you can push a bit harder. So they were also quite frightened. So I thought that was a great opportunity to maybe pretend I'm not so frightened. So here's a few pictures of the 15 along with the onboard. This is it. It's a beautiful Maserati birdcage. Here is one of the only lights on the Mulsanne Straight, which I thought was a very pretty picture. But I'll play a quick clip of what you can see. I can see at night time. So we made a very good start. I started 5th or 6th. And then at the end of the Mulsanne Straight, I was leading the first lap.
The structure motorized the most versatile
Of what it looks like to do 160 miles an hour in the dark with no idea where you're going. I promise the TV does a much better job showing the road than my eyes. So yeah, a real bucket list place to race. And that was a highlight for me, one of the highlights of this year. But after Silverstone and after Le Mans, I was very fortunately, I crossed paths with a gentleman who I met a couple of years ago in a similar situation through the help of Howden, John Watson, a very successful Grand Prix driver in his day. And John has been watching me for a number of years. John saw my drive at Silverstone and said to me, "That's great, when are you going to start racing proper stuff?" I said, "Well, you tell me, John, can you help me?" And John turned around to me and said, "Well, let me see what I can do. What do you want to race?" And I said, "Well, I really want to go to Le Mans and I want to race GTs." And he said, "Okay, leave it with me." And so a couple of weeks go by, and then I got a last minute test with a McLaren GT team. And this was in a McLaren 720S GT3. So all the way up to the top of the ladder in terms of GT cars. and it was a couple of weeks ahead. This is at the end of November, where you can guess what weather's like in November in the UK. At Silverstone, it was snowing quite badly on the way to the circuit, but thankfully, by the time I got there, it just turned to rain, which the test went extremely well. And in fact, the team brought their pro driver on the day with a view of potentially a drive for this coming season. And in my first lap, I was about 0.8 of a second quicker, and spent the entire day slightly quicker than the factory McLaren drivers. So the goal for this season, 2026, we've agreed a deal to race in GT World Challenge Europe with a McLaren semi-works team called Rocket RJN, who was co-owned by Jenson Button a couple of years ago, with the ambition of becoming a McLaren works driver a few years down the road, and also the ambition of getting to Le Mans in a couple of years' time. So to transition from the historic racing into the modern racing has been what my goal was right from the beginning. But of course, it's the same situation to drive in modern racing. You have to bring a bit of a budget until you're a factory driver. So I'm going into 2026. I've agreed a deal, and luckily I've pulled some sponsors on board for the season. We've pulled about £112,000 in so far out of the £300,000 goal. So we're hoping, I started testing in a couple of weeks at Portugal, Portimao, and starting the season in southern France, but actively looking for sponsors to do the GT3 drive this year, to do a full season. One of the highlights of the season is the Spa 24 Hours, so that is in July, and that's going to be kind of the crown jewel of the event. But the series has grown quite a lot in the last couple of weeks, as Max Verstappen has just signed a 5-year deal with Mercedes to enter a GT car. Quite a good friend of mine is actually driving the car. And so we're going into GT3 this season, 2026, and transitioning out of historic racing. So with a bit of luck and a bit more backing, hopefully we can continue down the road and get to Le Mans. So I've got some of the data. At each of the tables you'll see a booklet with some of my data from the test day, along with a bit more information about the category, how you can follow along, and then, if possible, get involved with the effort. We've got space on the car for any European companies looking to advertise, also hospitality packages, as well as a day at Silverstone in the 2-seater McLaren that the team owns, with obviously the potential for a sponsor to come along and have a ride along in the car, and if you dare ride with me, you can do that. So yeah, thank you very much everyone for coming and listening, and I hope I haven't been too boring.